Okay, everybody, the moment you've been waiting for. My bestie, Mr. Andrew Barber, is on the show tonight. He has, I did sneak onto your Hendon Mob, over $1 million in lifetime winnings. And that includes a 2015 World Series of Poker horse bracelet for over $500,000. And then last year you got 5th place in the Colossus for over $100,000. So welcome to my show. I'm so happy to have you, and surprisingly a little nervous considering you're one of the closest people in my life to me.
And we talk all the time.
And we talk all the time, and we share wine, and yeah, we hang out a lot. So, but there's two levels to people. There's like this comfortable friendship where we can just open up to each other. And then there's Andrew is going to talk about his PhD and mental preparedness for poker and things that I feel like I'm not at the level that you're at.
I mean, I just think that the most important thing is not knowledge as much as it is curiosity, because everyone is, there's only one person in the world that knows more than everybody else.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that knowledge is complete knowledge is always going to be unattainable, but everyone can be curious, and curiosity will lead to the acquisition of new knowledge. So, I mean, you're a curious person, which is half the battle.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I think in your younger years, you came across as pretty harsh, and a lot of people would be like, why are you friends with Andrew? And I think that there's a lot of parts to your character that I really admire and seek from a friend. And one of those is honesty above all else. And I think you don't spare my feelings sometimes when you tell me the truth. And I think early on we used to fight and block each other on Twitter and stuff because, it took me a little bit of time to recover from what you said and then realize, oh, he was telling you the truth and maybe you should look into this. And then I started really appreciating that from you. And now it doesn't bother me. And I think you're a lot softer too.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely matured over the years, but yeah, I really think that it's invaluable to have friends that you can be honest with and you can expect honesty from, because I think those are really rare. I think that people get caught up in politeness too much to the detriment of friendships and to to our individual experiences. I mean, I don't know how people can get better if their friends aren't telling them where they're, falling short.
Well, I think when I was younger, it's not that my friends didn't tell me where I was falling short, but they just also couldn't identify where I was falling short. So it was important for me to surround myself with people who not only were going to give me real feedback or constructive feedback, but also being able to see where my leaks were. I think as poker was easier, in the early 2000s, I know me and my group of friends oversimplified the study of poker and how we played it. And I think we were all just a bunch of buffoons during that time. And then you look at the type of play that was influential and the type of books that were out during that time. I mean, it was just I don't want to say we were victims of our circumstances, but we definitely didn't surround ourselves with very high level thinkers within poker. And then my game just never improved. So speaking of that, let's talk about your World Series of Poker 2015 horse bracelet. So we are back on. We lost you for a minute, technical difficulties, but I wanted to jump into the World Series of Poker in 2015 and kind of, if you can, give us a summary of long-term what got you to winning that bracelet, and then short-term preparations that you did that summer that got you in a mental state or even a physical state of well-being and being able to get through that tournament.
I mean, it's really easy in hindsight to be able to point to certain things that appear to be causal. Everyone who has success in any given domain is going to say, oh, I had it because of X, Y, and Z. You see it all the time with, you know, oh, millionaires all wake up at 4:30 and they have, you know, black coffee and intermittent fast and do high intensity interval training. And I think that that's oftentimes misguided to assume that all those things are going to lead to success, because you're only looking at successful people and you're trying to work backwards. But I will say that I thought I did a really good job of preparing myself for that summer. I was in the best shape of my life. I had this massive running bet. I was trying to break a 6-minute mile.
I remember.
And I've attempted this bet multiple times and have failed each and every time. And I keep wanting to do it. I keep
What's
wanting
the
to,
closest you got? What's the fastest you got?
it was right before that World Series. So I booked the bet when I was in Tahoe for a circuit event. So this would have been like November of 2014.
And who'd you book it with?
Several people, everyone I could find. And like, I was like, literally had like a half gallon of ice cream in my hand at the time. And I was like, you guys think I could run a 6-minute mile? And I'm just like stuffing my face, and everyone's like, I don't think so. I think that's pretty close to impossible. So I decided that if I got long enough odds, I was going to go for it. And I got like 10-1 odds on pretty much as much money as I wanted to bet. And I remember in that moment, as soon as I had all the bets booked, I threw the ice cream in the garbage, I put on my shoes, and I went outside for a run. And I think I timed myself shortly after that, and my first mile was like a 9:30, and I was completely gassed. And then in late April of 2015, I ran a 6:15.
Oh, wow. But you never were able to get below 6?
Yeah, I had this... I did this really dumb thing, which I like made sense in the moment, but I didn't realize the effect it was going to have on my psyche, which was I negotiated some buyouts with a couple people, and the buyouts made it so I couldn't lose anything. I had a free roll, but I think the fact that I was like avoiding the sting of the loss just took away a lot of my motivation. And I don't really have a great answer for this, but for some reason, I never ran again. I had until June 1st. I never ran again after that 6:15 time trial. So I ran the 6:15. I got on text. I texted everyone. I said, I've got 1 month to drop 15 seconds. I'm absolutely going to do it. And a couple of people offered me buyouts, and I just took them. And
So
I really regret doing it.
I want to talk to you about that sting, because those of us who know you know that you like to push people to put their money where their mouth is. You like to see how confident they are in either what they believe in or what they think will happen. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. So I have this article I wrote a couple years ago, and I thought about shopping it around. I've got like a lot of things that are in various stages of completion. And the one that I'm probably the furthest along on is this article about betting, the importance of betting, I think was the title. And I just looked at a variety of settings in which betting, I think, is like a worthwhile strategy, if not like a slam dunk.
A
But
strategy
basically,
sorry, go ahead. I'm just wondering if it's to change someone's mind or to see how sure they are.
So you were thinking specifically, like, I like to get people to wager on claims that they make. So
right.
that was like
and
one of
on
the
Twitter, we often see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I basically think that your opinion is only as good as the amount of money you're willing to wager on it. So if you are spouting off and you believe that I don't know, some athlete is the greatest of all time, or that some team is going to win a game, or that some politician is going to win an election, I only care about how much you're willing to wager on it. If you're not willing to wager anything, then you couldn't possibly believe that very much. Those are just empty words. And the reason, I mean, the reason for wanting to bet on this, it serves a couple of purposes. It's a tax on people who have beliefs without good information. So it's like a tax on stupidity or ignorance or overconfidence. But the other thing that it has the effect of doing is it filters out the bullshit. and it makes it so that the only signals, like the only opinions, and I use signal in like the signal versus noise context, that you only have signals and eliminates a lot of the noise, which is like the bullshit, the people who are spouting off and offering their opinions without, willingness to back them.
It kind of also sounds like you can then quantify in a monetary sense someone's belief system or how sure they are of something. Like you can then place some sort of odds on it. And I don't know like how you would place odds on an opinion of some sort if it's not like something like sports. If you're sure that an athlete will win an event, you can look at data to see how well they've done in the past and who their competitors are. But something like a belief system you have that isn't easily quantifiable, it would seem hard to lay odds.
The belief needs to lead to something that is like falsifiable or that leads to some kind of prediction.
Okay,
it can't be like philosophical.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Okay, because there are a lot of things that you can't falsify, and like like a belief in God or something like that.
Yeah, we can't bet on the existence of a deity,
right.
but we can bet on what the future of religion is going to be like. What is the rate of religiosity going to be in the U.S. in 2020 or 2030 or something like that. Yeah, go ahead.
So no, that being said, I want to lead into your PhD because I'm curious what your research is in, and it seems like anytime you and I talk, it seems like you're very interested in the social aspects of economics and how those two things collide. Do you want to tell us what your research is in and the things that you're interested in?
Sure. Well, I'm interested in everything. So, I mean, that's always been a problem.
Challenge accepted. I know things that you're not interested in, clearly. So yeah,
I'm interested in a lot, yes. So
cheap wine, how's that?
I like a good value wine. So maybe it's good to start with like explaining. I find myself explaining like the structure of the PhD. So like maybe that's worthwhile to go into. So PhDs kind of vary, but where they're all similar is that like they take a long time. The economics PhD is no exception. The median length, the last time I checked, is about 6.2 years. And I would say like within my department, people are taking either 6 or 7, with very few people taking 5 and a similar number taking 8. I expect to get out in 6 years. I'm in year 5 right now. So after the first year is coursework. You take microeconomics, macroeconomics, econometrics, which is like the math of econ. You take that sequence, then you take what's called a prelim, which are these like really high stakes exams that if you fail, you are kicked out of the program. And if you successfully pass that, then you move on to field courses. And this is where you kind of get into specialization. So after you have made the first choice between like micro and macro, and I'm a microeconomist, then you can start taking classes in specific subfields. The subfields in micro that are like worth highlighting are health, education, development, crime. Let's see, I'm sure I'm forgetting some on this. Yeah, so like that's just roughly to give you the flavor. And then after you take your field courses, then you start doing research. And I considered a number of different research topics. That's something I've always been kind of good at, is coming up with good questions. Like thinking like an economist is something that's kind of come naturally to me, and I'm decent at coming up with good research questions. Following through has always been a struggle. But the question that I landed on that I think is the most interesting, where I can have the biggest contribution, where the fewest people are working on it, and the data is coming in just like right now, is investigating this policy called the 4-day school week, which is something that might be familiar to someone who's from like the Midwest or the South. but a lot of K through 12 schools in this area of the country have shifted from 5-day school weeks to 4-day school weeks. And this policy hasn't been studied very much. And so I'm trying to kind of look at the holistic effects. How does it affect students vis-a-vis test scores? How does it affect teachers? What's the salary that a teacher's willing to accept to work at one of these schools? The theory being that teachers will accept a little bit less in pay for having a 3-day weekend every week. Also looking at attrition in teachers and whether or not schools get teachers of a higher quality. And then lastly, the effect on parents. How does it affect parents' labor supply? Are they having to take days off from work to be at home on the day off?
Yeah, I always thought that the school days followed work days for the most part. And it seemed like parents needed to put their children somewhere while they're at work. And obviously school followed the work hours. Yeah, I'd be curious to know how that affected parents and like if they had to then pay for daycare or after school care.
Yeah, there's some of that. There's some like cottage industries popping up where people will like pay, $20 or $30 for one day at like a daycare facility that only exists on that day off. I actually have made friends with a person who's published the only or written the only paper on this, the paternal labor supply. He actually used the paper to get a job last year, and he finds that parents aren't able to work as much, that they actually have a reduction in their labor. So, I mean, that's like a major cost of this policy.
Right, but it sounds so. Is there any thought to having a work-life balance kind of thing where the family has more time together? There's less income. The kids aren't going to school. They're reduced a day a week, everybody, and then everyone spends more time together, kind of like a European type of model.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
that they
like,
go to school 4 days a week, but they have less week work hours and school hours and less homework, I believe.
yeah. So the U.S. and Asia have many more school hours than most of Europe. Northern Europe actually has the fewest, but despite that has great educational outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I would say that based on what I can tell, people, like almost every single person in this equation loves the policy. That even parents who are the most adversely affected, they seem to come around. But it's not it's not a free lunch. Like, I think that there are some costs. I mean, there's people at the school that are losing their job or losing hours on the day off. But it is interesting. I mean, I think that where this fits into the larger scope is that I think you see a lot of companies going to 4-day work weeks, especially in Silicon Valley. Flex time is everything. Telecommuting is everything. People see these as huge benefits, and like they basically assign some dollar value. Like, you're willing to take a pay cut to accept jobs that have these policies.
Yeah, where I work, you can choose to have a 4-day work week, but you just get paid less. You just lose that 8 hours.
Oh, interesting. Because usually what I've heard is 410s. Like 410s has become the norm.
Yeah, we have flexible work hours where we can do 9 hours, and then every 2 weeks we get one day off.
Oh,
So,
yeah, the 980. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Or you can do half a day off one day a week if you do the 9s. Yeah, so there is that. I'm curious about your research. Is it to show a benefit to having that day off, or is it just to show what the outcome is? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, it is the latter. A lot of people accuse academics of having an agenda and trying to prove something. Like, the rule number one of economics research is, like, you want to be agnostic, and you can have hypotheses about what the direction of an effect is going to be, but you should never be seeking to prove your hypothesis. You want to remain agnostic, and you want to allow the data to tell a story. I would say that it's very difficult to follow this rule, especially given that people want to have significant results. Meaning, like, I want to be able to say, above a certain level of statistical significance, greater than 95% confidence that, this policy has a negative effect or it has a positive effect. And it's not always the case that you can find that, but sometimes people will try to hack, p-hack is the term, but like try to hack their data or, try to massage it in such a way that they get a significant result. And that's really tempting. It's definitely difficult to avoid the desire to get something significant that you can point to. Right.
I see that sometimes with visual analytics, like people will be like, oh, there was a 50% increase. And it was like, well, it went from 0.2 to 0.4%. Like really wasn't that significant. But so speaking of numbers, and you sent me a list of things that you wanted to talk about. And one of them was quantified self.
Yeah. So this is something I'm like kind of getting into a little bit. And I'd say that it relates to a lot of other interests of mine. But I'm kind of I think that you would appreciate this. Like it's more data is always better. And I think that you can, how you use the data is important. And there's just so many cool gadgets that are coming out all the time. And there's so many things. I mean, everyone's tracking like sleep now. People are tracking like heart rate variability.
I saw that one touch device that they created for you to track whatever you decide you'd like to track. And then you can, like that one guy was tracking his sneezes, and then he ended up getting rid of his allergy medications altogether because he was able to trend his allergies, which I'd like to look into his claim a bit more, because I feel like in the spring I'd never be able to get rid of my allergy meds. But it is quite interesting. I did go through the website and I saw that they're like, they're tracking cholesterol, and then there's some, I don't know if they're called studies. Are they necessarily studies? Because there's,
I don't know. We're in this world where I think that like crowdsourced research has passed like Western medicine. And that's, like, while there is research being done and like things like intermittent fasting and keto, I think the people like just experimenting with it and reporting back is A, better evidence, and B, has just far outpaced the research, because research is slow and medicine moves at such a glacial pace.
Yeah. So when I looked at the website, I was thinking about just data in general, and like we live in Silicon Valley. We live near Apple and Google and all this stuff, and like right now you could say something like, I can say microwave and I'll get microwave ads on my phone. Right. And it's kind of, I feel like we're in this midsection in between. Like we used to have a lot of privacy, and we used to work a lot to get our information out there, and now it's being pulled from us automatically, and it's becoming very convenient, and now we can make better decisions, and there's a lot of positive aspects to it, but then we also feel like our privacy is being lost, and some people are pushing away from that. I've actually just given in. I'm just like, Alexa's listening to me. She's probably going to respond to something now. My phone's listening to me. I'm accepting the convenience. How do you feel about that? About like how much data is in our lives now, and how we're just like moving towards ultra convenience at the, we're giving up our privacy.
Well, we see eye to eye on this one. Mia disagrees. Mia is very afraid of being watched, about having her privacy encroached upon. I happily make that trade-off. I think that the best way to justify it is that it's easier to trust private companies than it is to trust governments. And I would be much more concerned about, giving up my privacy to when the government's involved. But private companies have like an objective, which is to serve the customer, to make money. And if, companies suffer whenever there's data breaches. So there's definitely serious consequences to not protecting their customers' data. So yeah, I think that I happily make that trade-off. I'm so excited about the Internet of Things. Like I can just imagine, one thing we were discussing the other day was, imagine a refrigerator that told you that you were low on certain things when you were at the grocery store.
Right. And I think Samsung has that fridge already. I think
I
Samsung, while you're there, you can look because you can look through the actual door to see what's there, but then also when you're at the store on your app, it will show you that as well.
Oh,
I
that's
think,
cool.
yeah, I think I saw a video on YouTube on that because I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind that Samsung fridge.
I mean, yeah, they're probably in the early stages, but I mean, you could even take it a step further. I mean, imagine how many times have you had to throw away food that had expired? What if you knew the expiration date of every single thing in your fridge?
Right. I'm getting better at that though, because in Silicon Valley, you can make a ton of money and still be broke. So I'm getting better at rationing my food. I'm going like back to Eastern Europe. We have food ration cards in house. No, yeah, I totally get it. I would love something to tell me when to buy things. I'd love to know like what days I prefer to eat my salad so that I'm not buying salad 3 days before I use it and then it's all mushy, and you know what I mean? Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
would love, I'm going to go get myself that one touch device every time I eat a salad, and then I'll know what days to buy my salad.
Yeah, I mean, I just approach this as an economist. I mean, I think about everything in terms of costs and benefits and what are the returns going to be. And with a lot of this stuff, with a lot of the like the quantified self and a lot of the artificial intelligence, I just think about how much better my life is. I mean, I think about like how much better my life is with GPS or with Spotify or you know, calendar notifications or um, I set a reminder that like was activated when I became when I was in the proximity of a certain location. Like that's crazy. Like that's magic, and that makes our lives so much better. So I'm happy to trade off like my location at any given moment to a piece of software that's going to make my life better.
Yeah, I mean, I sincerely believe that we're moving towards a data-driven society and that we all should be making decisions based on data. And there's still a lot of people out there that don't trust the data or don't trust the numbers. And like, I don't know if you're curious at all. Like, okay, I don't know if you want to dive into this, but like the Mike Postle supporters, the flat earthers, the like, all of these kinds of people that are not convinced by data, bel- you know, they they have to see things with their own eyes. They need like the smoking gun or something, and they're not driven by data. Like, are these people being left behind? What do you think about that? Because I'm sure as an economist, you must be thinking about these things.
I don't accept the premise that they don't believe the data. I think they believe the data when it supports what they want to believe. And when it disagrees with what they want to believe, with the conclusion they've already reached, um, then they're not going to accept it. I mean, that's what we see with politics, right? That the people are willing to accept data points that confirm their previous beliefs, like confirmation bias, and they reject the data or the studies that challenge their beliefs. And so I
So
think it's as simple as that.
this is a question that you talked to me. There's people at work that are anti-vaxxers, and I've talked to you about that. And you said to me, just ask them if there's anything that would change their mind. And if they say no, then like the conversation is over. Is that kind of like how you deal with non-data driven people or people who have
Yeah, I mean,
confirmation bias?
I like when I stumble across a question that I think is really, really useful. And I think that's one of those really useful questions. And I think it's quite profound that, I mean, everyone should be willing to change their belief for if some amount of information or some kind of convincing story came forth, came to light. And if you don't have an amount of information that would convince you, if there's nothing that's going to sway you, then really your belief is no different than a religion or an ideology, and that's someone that's not worth debating or talking about, at least on that particular subject. They're not going to bring anything to the table. You're not going to change their mind, and they're not going to be particularly convincing uh, as far as um, sharing why they believe what they believe, because it doesn't sound like it's based in facts or deductions of any kind.
Yeah, I think that you're ahead of me in this game because you've decided to put your energy into people who are open to evidence, where I like to hit my head against the wall continuously. So um, let's go into wait but why, because you wanted to talk about wait but why, and I was like, what is this wait but why? And I googled them, and it was an amazing blog, and I just dove into it, and I've been reading it every night, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So what got you onto wait but why?
Um, well, I can't take all the credit. I really like to signal boost things, and specifically, I like to signal boost very few things that I think are really high quality. One thing, one little theory of mine, or an idea that I've been playing with, is that there's too many things being recommended at any given moment. So I'm sure that you have friends, I know I have friends that are always recommending books and movies and television shows and podcasts. Oh, so many podcasts. But it's difficult to navigate that landscape. But everyone is always recommending, this is so good, this is so good. Rarely do you hear the person that says, I listened to X or read X and it was just okay, you can skip it. I mean, that's a person, by the way, that's a really valuable signal, because if a person's going to say that, then you know that they're not being hyperbolic with everything that they consume and then recommend or talk about afterwards. So this is an issue that I worry about. So I try to restrict myself to one recommendation a week. So I will go out of my way, when I remember to do so, to not recommend more than one thing per week. And I tell all my friends that that's what I'm doing, so that when they do hear me recommend something, it's like, oh, wow, that must be good. Of all the things he could recommend this week, this is the one thing he chose to recommend. So to circle back to wait, but why? I'm in a like a discussion group book club with some other poker players, and I don't remember which person recommended it, and I feel bad because I want to give them credit. But someone had recommended this new series called The Story of Us, which Tim Urban, the creator of Wait But Why, had recently started. And I was actually kind of a Wait But Why neophyte. I mean, I was only familiar with a couple stories, but I happened to read one of the best ones, which is his interview, his discussion of Elon Musk, which included some time that he spent with Elon Musk, and how Elon Musk is basically thinking so much bigger than the rest of us, that it's not as simple as building a car or making solar panels. Or getting to outer space. He's thinking about how can we perpetuate the species, how we need to go extraplanetary. I mean, he's thinking so big, and I think that his detractors don't appreciate that nearly enough. That like guys like Elon Musk and Bill Gates, and we'll see with Jeff Bezos, but they're thinking about saving not humans as they are, but the future of humanity, like preventing us from going extinct. And I think that's important. That's one of the most important causes. And maybe if we talk about EA later, we can talk about that. So anyway, so I was familiar with Wait But Why, and it was very good. And I started this Story of Us, maybe, I think the first one dropped a couple months ago. And it's difficult to give a summary. I mean, it's fresh to you, so you might be able to do a better job than me. But basically, Tim is concerned that we're at this really bad equilibrium with politics and how we talk to one another and relate to one another, and how we talk past each other, and there's not mutual respect, and that basically we are kind of, he talks about the mind being of two parts, like a primitive mind and a higher mind, that the primitive mind has basically taken over our reasoning, and how our goal should be to kind of shift to higher mind thinking.
Yeah, and our primitive mind isn't aware of our higher mind, and the shift goes back and forth. And the emergence of us, and how we shift from the giant back down to ourselves. And I love that. I love the story of us. So I just want to go back to what you were saying about Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Because there's like a few points that I want to talk about. One of them being, like, in this day and age in social media, everyone thinks everyone is just as loud. You know, someone who dropped out of high school and who's a flat earther has the same ability to tweet and has the same characters allotted to them as a physicist. And everyone is stuck in this world of like their opinion is equal to everyone else's opinion. I, for one, think that's incorrect. I think that someone with a PhD in physics, I will go with their physics advice and I will follow their research and I will believe them over someone who studied flat earth for 200 hours on YouTube. But like, what are your thoughts on us? So like you said Elon Musk is like thinking about strategies to get us interstellar, to get us to keep humanity alive, to move us forward. And, you know, I say, what's Elon Musk thinking about? I want to be thinking about that too. And I want to stand on the shoulders of giants. I don't want to say, well, I have to learn everything myself. Well, I need to see it with my own eyes. At some point, you have to give in and say, the expert is saying this, and the majority of the experts are saying this. The majority of the experts are saying there's climate change. I'm going to go with that reasoning. I don't have the time to go through all of the research. I'm going to agree with what most of the experts say, and I'll look at a few research studies. Like, what do you think about that? The weight of people's voices, the weight of people's opinions, following experts.
I mean, the problem is, no, we live in such an exciting time. Like it's such an awesome time to be alive, but it's also, I mean, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We have so much technology and we misuse it. I can converse with Nobel Prize winners and yet I have to deal with trolls. It's
Right.
it's really tricky to navigate this space. But yeah, I mean, we're living through an era of anti-intellectualism and the denigration of expertise, that we don't appreciate experts anymore.
Do you feel that feels like there's middle ground missing, and I don't know where the middle ground is, because it feels like really loud voices from these people who feel like their opinion is important, but they don't really know what they're talking. They're not experts in their field. How about saying that? And then there's like these really higher end intellectuals that are tweeting and on social media. But it feels like reasonable humans are quiet, and like, I don't know if you feel the same way or.
I mean, you're basically describing Dunning-Kruger, which has been getting like tons of play over the last few years. But yeah, Dunning-Kruger is this unfortunate phenomenon in which people who have a good amount of intelligence or expertise on a topic have less confidence than people who have very little knowledge or expertise on a topic. I think that's actually like not the perfect misstating of it, but basically the people there's not a perfect correlation between one's knowledge in the topic and their confidence in their knowledge in the topic. And that comes forth in definitely on Twitter, in which people are unwilling to recognize their ignorance, or people who have less knowledge or less information. And then the people that have some or a good amount of it are just, I think, hyper aware of what they don't know. They know how
Right.
much they don't know, and then they think, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly offer my opinion.
So what do you think about like giving in and following the experts? Like, most climate scientists say that we are having an impact on climate change. And there are people who still refuse to acknowledge that. I say, I don't have time to be reading climate reports all day. I'm going to agree with most of the experts. But there's a good amount of people who are not like that. And I don't know if they're just louder now that we have technology and they have a voice, or if that's always been the case. But what do you think about that type of person?
I mean, the people that aren't going to believe climate scientists have an agenda, so that they're already predisposed towards, not wanting to believe that. I think it's as simple as that. It's not like the person who doesn't believe climate science is someone who has a general distrust of experts, and so they distrust experts in this specific area. They're happily to trust people who agree with them. But no, I think what you're describing is very efficient. I think that I think smart people can't possibly study every topic all the time. There's just a finite amount of time. There's so many things pulling for our attention. And I think that, I mean, I was just discussing this in this book club discussion group, that the name of the game in the 21st century is who can curate information the best. That we're just drowning in it, and you have to be able to figure out how to curate it. You know, it's seeking out the experts and being really efficient at finding the people that you can trust is everything. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, when it comes to physics, find the 5 or 10 most trusted physicists and follow them and read everything that they write and look for when they're challenged and seek that controversy. You don't want to seek controversy between, you know, the 99.7% of climate scientists and the 0.3% that are funded by by the petroleum industry. No, you want to find conflict. The conflict that matters is the conflict between respected individuals.
So you know, and I don't know if all the viewers know, that I grew up in Canada and then I moved to the States about 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now. And one of the things that has really bothered me, and I went from being a Republican, as you were, to moving into the center, and then now I feel like I don't belong anywhere. One of the things that bother me in American politics is the tribalism, and if we're, you know, kind of circle around back to Wait But Why, because they describe this, the tribalism of what we believe in. And so for me, I think, like, is it weird that all Republicans basically have decided to say we don't believe in climate change, even though there's so much significant evidence? They all, as this like tribe, have decided to deny it, and I don't understand that. I don't understand. Like, is there anyone in the Republican Party that says, you know what, I'm an economic conservative, but I believe that there's climate change going on? It's just so odd to me, these stances that we take.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's room for disagreement, and I would say that it's like occurring between the adults in the room. I want to make sure to I don't want to piss anyone off here. I think that it happens on both sides. I think we just happen to be in a period in which the party in power might be a little bit more guilty of it, but like 5 or 10 years from now, it could totally switch. The Democrats could be guilty of you know, fallacious reasoning just as easily. And I think that Tim Urban in this story of us, I think he, you know, we were all complimenting him on how he manages to deal with a topic that is so polarizing, that's so incendiary, without stepping on any toes. I think it's just so beautifully written. I think that it's, I mean, it's really art what he's done. He creates his own vernacular that he uses within the piece. So these terms aren't loaded like the typical terms that we use. Yeah. He tries to avoid like liberal versus conservative. I mean, it's really just
very
talking
clever.
About.
Yeah.
It's so clever, and he's talking about. I mean, I don't know how far you are, but he really explains like why it is that all members of a particular tribe arrive at the same conclusions, because basically the giant like polices itself, that everyone has to be on the same page or else you're going to be exiled from the group. So there's a lot of social pressure that exists there. I mean, I know that whenever I defect from from a belief that's supposed to be held by the majority of Democrats, because unfortunately, like, I'm probably labeled as that. I'm like you. I would prefer to be in no camp, but sometimes it's like just more efficient linguistically to say, oh, I'm a Democrat or whatever. I'm liberal. But whenever I defect, I feel like there's this reflex to like pull me back in line. Like, how dare you? You're one of us. You have to believe the things that we believe.
Right.
And I kind of have always believed that, you're doing it right when you're pissing off both sides. I think
Right.
that's like a really good sign, a good heuristic that you're thinking independently if you're pissing off both Republicans and Democrats. And that's something I don't know if I'm trying to do that, but that is something that is definitely happening.
One of the things that the viewers may not know is kind of how I met you, and it was like a transitional period in my life. And I think one of the things that was like, I call myself Veronica 2.0 on Twitter, and that's because I feel like I've upgraded my software. I probably should be 3.0. But around the time that I met you, I feel like that was like a slow upgrade for me. And
Yeah,
one
you
of
were
the
still in beta
shifts,
when I met you.
yeah, one of my biggest shifts was just giving in to being wrong. I feel like a lot of people really dig their heels in and refuse to be wrong, and carry this embarrassment. I've let go of that embarrassment, and I'm just like, okay, I was wrong about a big issue within politics. I was very much like Republican libertarian, and then I had a son who was like had medications that cost more than our household income at the time. And I was like, oh shit, we would have died. Like all of us would have not survived. We would have been on the street if it wasn't for social safety nets. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to come to like a lot of conclusions in becoming wrong. And I feel like a lot of the problem with these social norms and like being shunned from the tribe is just like this fear of being wrong, and then this embarrassment that comes with it, and potentially ridicule. So rather than face embarrassment, they'll just dig their heels in the ground. And I feel, and I know this is might be an odd comparison, but we a lot of times in CPR, when you're talking about the Heimlich maneuver, they talk about people a lot of times will die because they're too embarrassed to show that they're choking, because they don't want to make a scene in a restaurant or something.
Oh, wow.
And you end up having to do it having to give them chest compressions rather than getting behind them and giving them the Heimlich, because they were too embarrassed until they passed out. And so like, I feel like people's embarrassment is detrimental to them, and they can't say, you know what, I believed in something for 10 years. I was like, I thought that libertarian was the best way, that every man for himself, and I was wrong. Like, what do you think about that might be influential in people like being stubborn in their party?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's unfortunate that society has not created a space to be wrong, to make mistakes, to fail, to change your mind on something. I mean, you don't have to look far to American politics. If someone flip-flops on something, that's a bad sign. Wait a sec. So I had an opinion, I got more information, I changed my mind, and that's a
Right.
bad thing? That's
Right.
crazy. That's literally crazy. But that's a majority belief that a politician who flip-flops is worse than one who doesn't, when in actuality it's more likely the opposite. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how this is like a cultural thing, and I don't know if I have the answer. But I think the best thing we can do is to try on a personal level, just allow ourselves to be wrong. Don't be tied to any opinion or belief that you have. Be willing to update in the face of new information. And then when you signal that to others, when you signal that you're fine being wrong, and that you actually celebrate when you update or when you're corrected, then I think that maybe it has the potential to be contagious. So
Yeah.
I think I try to, whenever possible, be as loud as I can about admitting that I'm wrong, thanking the person for helping me to see the error of my ways, and to also to applaud others who are able to do the same.
Just thinking back to the tweets about R squared. That's all. I like strong-armed you to apologize on Twitter.
I mean, another way to think about this is like, think about all of the things all the opinions that you've held where someone disagreed with you. what are the odds that you are right 100% of the time? If you respect the people that disagree with you, it's probably closer to 50-50. So 50% of the time you're wrong. I mean, that's like staggering. I don't think the average person, when asked, how often do you think you're wrong about your opinions, would say anything close to 50%.
Right. It's kind of like the same question when people are asked how good of a, like, do they think they drive better than the average driver? And most people say yes. People overestimate their skills and abilities a lot.
So I've always made it a goal, and I don't know if I'll do this in my lifetime, of trying to memorize or to learn every single cognitive bias and every single logical fallacy. And this is one that I actually know pretty well because I like the name of it so much. But yeah, what you're describing is what's called illusory superiority, or the Lake Wobegon effect, or the Lake Wobegon fallacy, which is that, I mean, the reference isn't that important, but Lake Wobegon was like this fictitious place in like Garrison Keillor's on NPR. But the tagline for the community, like the Lake Wobegon community, is everyone is smarter than average, or everyone's prettier than average, which is obviously impossible. But yeah, like the ones on the stats on driving are crazy. Like 97% of people think they're better than average drivers.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Where the men are strong, the women are what?
I knew it was going to be men strong or intelligent and women beautiful. I already know.
Yeah, men are strong, women are beautiful, and the children are smarter than average. So, yeah, so when I first learned that, I mean, I was very quick to say, you know what? I think I'm probably a below average driver. I think that I'm okay with that.
I've been in a car with you. I would agree with that. I'm glad you have Tessie now.
Yeah, no,
You're
I'm very
smart
thankful.
in like every single way, but you do have some leaks.
I
You know,
fully
it
admit that. I
reminds me
need a
that
car that drives itself.
it reminds me that you are not a robot, because there was a time where I thought you were a robot.
I think that I have robot tendencies, but yeah, I mean, I'm clearly flawed. I'm just thankful that I am like a robot in the areas where most humans are not.
Where you
So
want
that's
to
where
remain as objective as possible.
Exactly. Like I feel really lucky, and I don't know if I can take credit for that. I think I had a desire to try to foster that kind of that style of thinking, and there's a positive feedback loop there, where if you start to, like, if you're encouraged to think rationally, then you're only going to become more rational over time, and that's going to have spillover effects into other areas of your life.
So, I kind of wanted to get into, are you still into trying to help poker players get out of poker?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is something that it's really difficult. So I've tried it a couple different ways. Like I had a gathering in Vegas once. I've messaged with a bunch of people. I've offered like coaching services, but it's basically obvious.
Yeah,
Go
like
ahead.
where did it all I don't mean to interrupt, if you're going to explain this, but like where did it all start? Like why get out of poker?
I mean, what I'm going to say is nothing new. But I think everyone who plays poker understands that it's not getting easier. It's getting more and more difficult every single day. And one of the things that's true of poker that's not true of other vocations is that your income is most likely going to decrease over time rather than increase.
Right.
I think poker players don't realize how much they're giving up by not being in a traditional vocation, where like raises are a possibility.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever met a poker player. Yes. And yeah. Very true. So, you know, I think back to what drew me to poker. It was like the autonomy and the freedom, and, you know, it was intellectually stimulating. But there's a ceiling. I mean, everyone's going to hit a ceiling, and, you know, we can try to push that ceiling up with, you know, studying solvers and, you know, finding the right games and trying to be better than our opponents. But at the end of the day, like there's a ceiling to how much one can make playing poker. And in addition to this, a lot of the people that went into poker went into it at a young age. Some of them dropped out of school, and never really got to pursue other interests, never even considered what else they would do. And then, when they decide to step away from the game, they're kind of in a tough spot. It's almost like a washed up athlete, that maybe didn't
Right.
get a major or something like that. What do you do? Are you going to try to capitalize on your former athletic career? A poker player doesn't even have that option. So yeah, I think that I realized that there were going to be a great number of poker players, and this first happened with Black Friday. That's where you saw your first mass exodus from the U.S. player pool. There were a lot of pros that had to quit after that. Some went into DFS or daily fantasy sports, but many of them had to find other things to do. And I just think that there's a lot of, this is somewhat related to, not wanting to be wrong or wanting to avoid embarrassment. I think there's a lot of shame that comes with retiring from poker, stepping away from poker. And I think I wanted to provide resources or create a space for people to have that discussion about, I want to leave the game. I've been playing for a decade and I don't know what to do. And so, a friend of mine, Corey Kilpatrick, and we talked about how this was really important. And Corey's actually kind of an amazing story. Corey's one of the, I think, best PLO players on the planet. Maybe he's been passed by in recent years, but I still think he's incredibly sharp. And I think still plays a little bit and does quite well. But he pretty much dropped poker and went to a coding boot camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got a lot of those out here.
Yeah, so he went to a very exclusive coding boot camp, one that the acceptance rate is low single digits. I think it was Hack Reactor, I think is the name of it. But he completed the program. He got a place in San Francisco. He's working on projects. He brought some friends out, so they kind of worked together on stuff. And I think Daniel Weinman is another poker player who he went through Lambda School, which poker players are gaga for. For people who aren't familiar with Lambda School, it's an income. I think it's ISA is the acronym. It's an income sharing agreement that basically they educate you for free in exchange for a percentage of your future earnings at the job that you will get as a result of their teaching. Mm-hmm. It's awesome because the incentives are perfectly aligned. They have incentive to teach you as much as possible so you can get a better job. And there's all these amazing stories of people who are making 30 or 40K who are making six figures 6 months later.
Yeah.
So yeah, he went through that. So Corey and we had this discussion. I was like, maybe I could help people who want to go back to college. There's a number of people who didn't complete their degrees. And I think going back to college is a great way to pivot. I myself, when I was deciding to go back to school, used college to totally change my path. My undergraduate training was in engineering, and I audited classes in economics and realized that was for me. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of switch course. So Corey and I put together this Life After Poker group, and we had a meeting, and so many things, there was a level of excitement, but kind of no one ran with it and fell off a little bit. But I definitely want to put myself out there as someone that anyone can talk to at any time. Just send me a message or an email if you're feeling lost, or if you want me to, I can help connect people to the right resources. So I've had contacts with people who have started businesses, done trading, gone back to undergrad, gone to grad school, have done coding, have started businesses. Trying to think if I'm forgetting anything else. Just a variety of different vocations. Gotten their CPA. So a variety of different vocations. And yeah, poker's such a fantastic skill as far as developing an intellect that can be leveraged, in a number of domains successfully, effectively. So I think that, kind of the world's your oyster. If you're an accomplished poker player, it's just a matter of, and this is where people have a hard time, is that it's hard to turn down the easy money. I think it's really, really hard.
So with my own career, obviously people know I'm not a professional poker player, but I feel like I look at my job like a linear graph, and that initially it was like a grind, and then I worked my way up, and now I'm at a place where I I'm seeking more fulfillment than I am monetary gain. And it's easy for me to say because monetary wise, I can pay my bills and I'm fine. And I'm just wondering if there's like a long-term goals that you help them set, that like, okay, initially it's going to be a grind. You know, like if you ask them what they want to do, you have like a time period where they feel like, you know, it's painful because they're doing something completely different. Maybe they now set an alarm where they didn't before. And then eventually they'll migrate into starting to enjoy a job or project, and then like eventually reach fulfillment. Is that the end goal, or is it just like getting them a job to get out of poker?
That's a good question. I don't think I thought about it on on that deep a level of whether it is about like self-actualization and getting people to be
Because
fulfilled.
I think there's just like from grinding in my 20s and having really shitty jobs that I hated and thinking like I fucking need to finish school because I can't do this forever. It like I can imagine if I was like great at poker and making, you know, playing big games and making a lot of money, I just wouldn't even start there, and I wouldn't be in a spot right now where I'm at work, my brain is happy doing what I'm doing.
I mean, it's a cruel game that is played on young poker players who have success early, and then like that success is taken away from them, or like the game passes them by, or they were just running above expectation. I mean, we have friends who, you know, are young and have played super big games, who now, you know, don't have enough to play in the smallest of games. So
Right.
it's, you know, life is going to be hard for that person or people like that. And I just don't know how you recover from that mentally. And that's, I think, what I worry about, like more broadly, with poker players who, uh, you know, everyone's playing smaller now. I mean, I shouldn't say everyone. I should be shouldn't be so hyperbolic. Many people played bigger 10 years ago than they play today. That's just the reality of the poker economy. Like a lot of people are playing smaller now. It's crazy how hard the games are, even at small stakes online. I consider myself extremely fortunate to be living in California, where like the games are still really good. I can't imagine, you know, living in another part of the country where, you know, you can't make more than, you know, $30 or $40 an hour playing poker. I'm sure that that's the case in like a lot of, you know, the middle of the country or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think that the idea was basically this is a hard transition. People need help. Everyone needs help, and you know, maybe I could, you know, help a few people to switch to something that would be both more fulfilling and lead to them having, you know, like a higher income stream in the future, and could maybe open some more doors. I mean, poker generally does not open doors. There are people do some networking in like high stakes games, but I think by and large, uh, you know, you're not going to find numerous opportunities falling on your lap, you know, grinding 2-5.
Yeah, and definitely the people who have survived this long and are still playing high stakes, um, they're the best of the best. Long term, and having that money management too. You can be good and not have that money management and be playing low stakes. So speaking of poker, let's talk about your book, Split Pot
So
Games.
that is correct. So it's in the very infant stages. But I've got a contract signed, which is a useful commitment device. If I didn't have that, I don't know if I'd be as confident that I'll finish it. But yeah, so I was kind of approached last summer by D&B Publishing that published a great book recently. It's a mixed game book by my friend Dylan Lindy, that I think is the best mixed game book that's on the market right now. And I actually feel that some of the best books in history have been written like within the last, 12 to 18 months. I mean, I think Andrew Brokos's Play Optimal Poker is probably as good as it gets for poker books right now. I think Matt Matrix's The Game Plan is fantastic. Probably the most approachable poker book that's actually extremely effective as well. I think Dylan's book is fantastic. So I was kind of motivated, and they approached me and they said we were looking for a split pot book. I told them my background. I told them, that my favorite games are split pot games. I think my best games are split pot games. So we had a discussion, and I'm in the process of working on it right now. I've kind of got like the list of games that I want to tackle. Mix has become very popular in the last couple of years. It's actually cannibalized some long-standing games like Limit Hold'em or Straight Omaha High Low. Like Mix has kind of devoured that in both LA and Vegas, and people kind of like the fun of a game that's constantly changing. Having a rotation of 6, 8, 10 games or something like that.
So I've had discussions with different players about Kyle Kitagawa is a Limit Hold'em player, and he used to always tell me that the player pool in Limit Hold'em is, if we look at like evolution, human evolution, he would say they're like still in the Neanderthal phase compared to Hold'em, where they're like interstellar already. And so I'm wondering, with the mixed games or the split pot games, if you feel that that's still an advantageous area for a poker player to move his or her direction towards, if there's still money to be made in that area.
Well, this should be no shock to you. I disagree with Kyle on this. The players I fear more. I mean, I do have like a ranking of the players that I fear the most. And at the very top of that list are Limit Hold'em specialists. They scare the bejesus out of me. They're
why? Because they're check raising you on the flop all the time.
Yeah, I fear
that was like an Annie Duke thing. She's like, if I'm in early position, I check raise everything. I was like, oh, just clicking buttons. That's what I'm going to do.
I want to come back and talk about Annie Duke because I think her book is one of the best books I've ever read.
Okay.
But anyway, no, like Limit Hold'em specialists are the closest to robots. I mean, them and Limit Hold'em specialists and like the players that play high rollers are like the closest to playing against computers that most people will ever witness or play against. So I really fear Limit Hold'em specialists.
I want to hear why you say that. And I'm wondering if the bet sizing that's already fixed eliminates some of the variables and makes it more like there's less decisions in the game tree.
I mean, like a phrase that I've heard associated with Limit Hold'em, and this would be true of like most limit games, but I think it's especially true of Limit Hold'em, is it's death by 1,000 cuts. So like in No Limit Hold'em,
just like thin edges then? Yeah,
like in No Limit Hold'em, like the bad players, like they stack off incorrectly, like once or twice a day. And then like that, they just lose, 2 buy-ins. Limit Hold'em mistakes are like fractions of a big blind times, 1,000 times in a session or something like that. Or maybe
right.
a couple hundred times is probably more realistic. And so, and the Limit Hold'em specialists just know all of the correct spots. Like they know like their 3-barreling frequency, and they know like their c-bet frequency on every board texture, and they know what they should be 3-betting and 4-betting, and they play perfectly out of the small blind, and they defend appropriately in the big blind. And there's just so many intricacies, and I think Limit Hold'em is like this science, whereas like No Limit Hold'em is an art. And obviously, like it kind of blends a little bit. Like there's artistic elements to Limit Hold'em, maybe less so than there are scientific elements to No Limit Hold'em. So I have a healthy respect for really good Limit Hold'em players, and some of the best players I know, like objectively across all games, are very good Limit Hold'em players.
So I think maybe Kyle's point was to the fact that the player pool, you have, like with Hold'em, everyone getting better. So many more players are better in Hold'em, whereas the limit Hold'em player pool, yes, there are great players and the great ones are really good, but there are so many more players that are not great at that game and losing a lot of value in many spots.
That may be true. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion on this. I think that I don't know of an appreciable difference between the two player pools. I think that there's going to be bad people in both. I think the mistakes are going to be much more egregious in No Limit Hold'em, and that's why I think that game will always be better. But like Limit Hold'em, the appeal of Limit Hold'em is that it's such a simple game that it's not going to deter anyone, and that No Limit Hold'em, like that line in Rounders about how pros won't even play No Limit Hold'em; they can't handle the swings. So No Limit Hold'em is deterring some players who would just prefer what they perceive to be like a lower variance game or a less risky game like Limit Hold'em. But to get back to your original point, which was where does the mixed games fall in there? I would say that mixed games shouldn't be appealing because people will have like an easier time winning money. I don't know if that should ever be what drives a person to choose a game, because like No Limit Hold'em is probably the easiest game to make money in, but it's like not that much fun. And I think the average person who's deciding what poker game to play should pick something that's enjoyable.
Yeah,
And I
you're
think
talking about fulfillment now. You're reaching there, yeah.
I think that mix is awesome for a variety of reasons. I think it's intellectually stimulating. I think the people that play it are really interesting. It creates a variety of situations. Learning about one game, I think, causes you to play the other games better. So if like you ever play mix and you go back to Hold'em, you're going to be a better Hold'em player. And I think that just learning new things in general is something that we should all be trying to do, whether it's a new sport or a language or, what have you, a musical instrument. I think that like there's all sorts of benefits that we can experience cognitively by learning new things. So yeah, why not try to learn 20 new games? If you play mix, you're going to learn at least a couple new ones, because the mix is always changing.
Right.
Because mixed players are really good at inventing new games that they can, be a little bit better at than everyone else. But yeah, I kind of wanted to write this book because I thought it would be fun. It's like a bucket list item. I think writing a book is just a cool thing to be able to say you've done in your life. I've got like a bunch of notes. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, who's your target audience? Like, are you looking to give this book to a beginner where they can learn the game and enjoy it, start having fun playing the game? Or is this someone who wants to play a 10K horse event?
I mean, I'm happy that Dylan wrote his book first, because that kind of like helps set the tone for like maybe how the book should be written for a broad audience. I don't think I want to write a book that is going to, help Phil Hellmuth be a little bit better in like some split pot draw game variant. I think the goal for me would be a book that is enjoyable to read, familiarizes people with these different split pot games, maybe levels the playing field a little bit, gives them food for thought, and maybe something they can build upon. They can take these ideas and run with them. I mean, I'm not going to give away the whole playbook. My thoughts on every single game would be, multiple books. But I think that what I can do is, I mean, one contribution I'm going to be making with this book is that no one's ever really done equity calculations for some of these like more obscure games. So I'm literally in the process of figuring out how I want to write code in Python to do equity evaluations for games that there are no equity calculators for. There's tons of calculators for
So the
Hold'em and
solvers,
Stud and the rest.
the solvers can't handle it, or
no, it's not solvers as much as like if you're curious what your equity is with Ace King versus Pocket Deuces,
right.
We could find that out in seconds. You might have an app on your phone, Poker Cruncher. We might go to Pro Poker Tools. There's any number of Card Player magazine. And then when you go like down the list to games that are like a little bit less popular, maybe your Stud, Raz, Omaha High Low, PLO, obviously. There's a few that exist for that. But then when you get to like Triple Draw, there's only one. When you get to Badoogie, there's only one. And then when you go past those, like when you combine those games, Badoosie or Badacy, which are basically like merging Triple Draw with Badoogie. Half the pot goes to the best Badoogie hand, half the pot goes to the best Triple Draw hand. There is no calculator that exists. People have scribbled some notes in various Google Docs and Excel spreadsheets that I've seen, and there's been some discussion on like 2 + 2, but it hasn't really been collected. And so this is like both a research project for me, a labor of love, and a chance to, I don't know, contribute something into the world. And it's something I always intended to do. I think a lot of poker players talk about how they want to write a book like when they retire. And I'm not going to be playing as much poker when I graduate and get a job. And so this is kind of my Mia is saying, yes, I'm going to continue to play, but I think I'm going to play a lot less than I do now.
I think you'll stop playing once you stop being able to make money in it.
Yeah.
Now,
hopefully that doesn't come anytime soon.
So these mixed games, these split pot games, besides Omaha 8, and I know that you play regularly Omaha 8 at Bay 101 Casino, and occasionally I'll see you there. I've played in the games with you a few times. They're hard to find. Other than Omaha 8, they're hard to find. So I want to go back to your World Series of Poker horse bracelet. How did you prepare for the horse event without being able to play live in those games?
Oh, that's a good question. So there are a variety of ways to do this. I would say where there's a will, there's a way. So there are ways of playing mixed games online. So for example, in 2014, this was post Black Friday. So you had to use the American facing sites like Bovada. It was Bovada at the time. Now it's Ignition. America's Card Room. America's Card Room spreads. I haven't played on it in a long time, but I know they spread Omaha High Low, and then I believe Bovada was spreading at least Omaha High Low and Stud. And then there was a Bitcoin site, Seals with Clubs, and they spread all of the crazy mixed games. So that's like, as far as play, there were plenty of opportunities to play there. But I had played so much mixed to that point already. I mean, I really cut my teeth playing in like small mixed game tournaments in Reno, which was like the tournament mecca in the early mid 2000s. And like LA at LAPC, I did that a couple of years. So I played a bunch, and really at that point, I don't know if playing additional hands was going to be as helpful as studying what other people were doing to kind of get a sense of what like population tendencies were and what other strategies people were using. So something that I did, I think that year for the first time, was I started watching the replays from Stars final tables. Mm-hmm. So Poker Stars has 3 series a year, Scoop, W Coop, and T Coop. Spring Championship of Online Poker, World Championship of Online Poker, and Turbo Championship of Online Poker. And those replays are available on YouTube, and it's a resource that, it's shocking how few people have watched these. The cards are face up. You get to see the best players in the world playing every game from start to finish. I think the number of views for some of these is like in the hundreds or like low thousands, which is
I remember before the World Series of Poker 2019, you gave me a little Omaha 8 clinic.
Oh, right.
And we watched one of those, and it was great to see how the best players in the world are playing.
Yeah, no, it's been incredibly useful. Yeah, I mean, you get to, I mean, I've played hands against people that I watched play on stars. Like that's just an unfair advantage to have.
So I want to ask you, since you've had so much success in poker, and you're very much a math-oriented man, and um, the decisions you make are typically driven by evidence and data. And so, what are your thoughts? Like, how much value do you put on tells? And like, there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I'm a field player, I'm an exploitative player." How much do you value that type of data or information?
Yeah, this is such a common question, and that my answer for the longest time was that like it just didn't matter. That there was too much other stuff to focus on, and then I think that as the edges have gotten smaller, that the relative value of tells has increased. Like if you've plugged all your other leaks, like if you figure that you know your ranges are really well defined and you have no problem sticking to them, and your bet sizing, you know, pre and post is solid, and you know just aren't making any egregious mistakes, then the natural progression is that you're going to like you should be looking to exploit any you know any tells that people have, or any um, just any obvious things that people are giving away. So I think there is some value there as far as like a split. I mean, it really depends on where you're at in your poker development. So most people, the overwhelming majority of people, should be doing a lot, like spending a lot more time on ironing out their leaks. So, like for example, I was just coaching a friend recently, and he sent me a hand history, and he's just playing hands from positions that he should never be playing.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, then he should never spend a minute on you know tells, whether they be physical tells or bet sizing tells or anything like that. He should just get those leaks worked out.
Right. So,
But if he go ahead.
no, I was going to say climbing the mountain of poker, once you reach the peak, that's where the tells are. Everything
Yeah,
else should be your
the peak
foundation.
that yeah, where people are investing their time after they've spent a lot of time in the lab,
Hmm.
you know, ironing this stuff out, is the stuff that never got attention before, which is like physical fitness and psychological fitness, and you know diet and exercise and sleep and meditation,
Right.
and um, you know maybe getting therapy. I mean, like working through your demons, and like coping with tilt. And that's the stuff that I think is has become the low hanging fruit, where before the low hanging fruit was just knowing the ranges that you should be playing and like not being terrible post flop. But now that everyone has that stuff figured out, now the only way to differentiate yourself are these kind of intangibles.
Yeah.
And so like you do see like poker players who are very good, like staring into the soul of the person playing next to them. And I think they're legitimately trying to get some information there. Now, whether or not they're successful, whether or not it's like some sort of psychological domination thing, I'm not sure. I know that, and this is really difficult because a lot of it's happening on a subconscious level. I think that poker players are really good doing what Malcolm Gladwell describes as like thin slicing. So in his book Blink, he talks about how um, that it's difficult to put words to it, but sometimes we can have like a snapshot of a situation and we know that something's a little off. And I think that that's what poker players are describing when they talk about tells, that that their opponent is just behaving in such a way, has such a mannerism, but it's hard to put their finger on it, but they just know like he's doing something that means weakness, or he's doing something that means strength.
Right.
Um, and that's what I rely upon on like kind of more marginal decisions, unless it's
So,
really obvious.
yeah. So, you were talking about diet and meditation and improved health. And I know that was like one of the topics you wanted to discuss. And how long have you been on a ketogenic diet now?
Oh my gosh, off and on for a really long time. I mean, like so many good habits that I have trouble sticking to. it's just this difficulty of remembering how good I feel while I'm doing it and how bad I feel when I'm not doing it. It's how I feel about meditation. It's how I feel about exercise, good sleep. It's the things that I know in my mind that I should be doing, but I sometimes struggle to do. And then I find myself having to make like bets to ensure that I do these things. Like that's what I booked recently. I booked some bets that require me to like meditate every morning. And I know like that's not kind of in the spirit of meditation. Like meditation should be kind of an intrinsic thing.
Yeah.
But I think I sometimes require extrinsic motivation to kind of prime the habit. And then hopefully I can take away the bet and the habit will stick.
I kind of haven't, meditation is the one thing that I haven't tried, mainly because I've listened to so much Sam Harris. I think thanks to you, but
His
he
app is supposed to be really, really good.
his app, yeah, I've heard is great, but he also talks about not being able to properly meditate until you're like 3 days in silence. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing 3 days, so I won't be able to do 20 minutes. I honestly like, my mind can't sit still. I have a super bad problem. I don't think I could meditate. I'd have to honestly take a retreat and need a coach.
There's this funny quote about meditation that it said like everybody should sit in stillness. I'm going to butcher this quote, so I apologize if someone knows the quote exactly, but it's like everyone should sit in stillness or should meditate for 15 minutes a day, unless you're incredibly busy, and then you should do it for an hour.
Well, the test where it's not a test, but there's like a recommendation to sit still for half an hour in the room with no devices on, no TV, no nothing. I can't. I haven't been able to do it. I haven't been able to make 30 minutes. I could do it in the morning if I used to daydream a lot as a kid, and I could daydream for hours. If I could just daydream, but just to sit still with nothing, with just a calmness, I don't think I could.
I read a philosopher once that was asked, that posed the question, how many of the world's problems are caused by man's inability to sit by himself quietly in a room for 30 minutes?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a struggle that's worth pursuing. I mean, I've tried and failed many times, and I just started like a new streak today. Actually, like this meditation bet started today. Mia tried it. Like I think she was like 2 days in, and she's like, "I'm Zen now."
So
but she experienced benefits right away. So I think that even trying and struggling, like no one's going to be good
right.
at it first. Everyone's terrible at first.
So I'm very open. I've learned to be very open in the last 5 years about a lot of things in my life. And like I experienced trauma. I lost my son. And in some ways, not that that was good at all. It was a horrible situation and it was a horrible outcome. But in a lot of ways, it's made me more grateful, and it's made me more, now I seek fulfillment over monetary gain. Monetary items are not really, there's no substance in them to me. I prefer, conversations with you and Mia and going out for dinner rather than like buying something. But in the same sense, it's also given me, the trauma has caused me to be unable to sit still with my thoughts, because that's the first place I dive. And so like, it's like in some ways my life has gotten so much better, and I'm more cognizant of people and things around me, and I have more empathy for these like unique vulnerable populations. But in other ways, that's been one of them where I can't sit still. I can't not think or have this quiet,
Yeah, I mean, I think the useful analogy that I hear made with meditation is meditation's like exercise, and nobody can bench press 200 pounds the first day.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you have to start with the bar, and you'll gradually work your way up. And the thing is, like, everyone is so bad at meditating. I mean, I think I remember my first time. I don't know if there was a difference between me sitting on a couch and trying to rattle off a to-do list and the meditation that I was attempting that day. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just thought after thought after thought, and you notice this slow progression of being able to, and like I really recommend the guided meditation, where the person is basically helping you to recognize that you're going to have thoughts. That's okay. Have the thought and then just kind of watch it go by like a cloud. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
like a phrase that's used, and you get better at it. You get better at being present, better at dispensing with thoughts, or eventually getting to the point where you can just be still without the thoughts.
Yeah. Is it something you think that, because I often think like when you and I have been friends for a while, and you and I were friends during one of the lowest points in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to you, like, Andrew, I can't read a book. Like, I haven't even showered in 3 days. Like, I can't meet my very basic needs. Do you think it's something that like someone needs to be at a certain place in their life to do?
I mean, I never want to. Uh,
It feels to me like one of those things where, like, kind of where I am with my work, like, I feel like I'm striving for fulfillment, pardon me, and I'm striving for happiness and enjoying, like, having my brain enjoy the work that I do rather than doing a job that I don't like for more money. And it's kind of, it feels like it's one of those things where, like, you should be, it feels like you would attempt meditation when you know are in a good place in your life. Like, no one's in like a shit relationship and a shit job and come home and is like, I'm just gonna zen out and it feels like the mountain peak.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a misconception. So, I mean, I don't want to pretend to know what someone who's going through a great tragedy feels like, but I do know that people who have experienced and overcome depression almost always recommend like a checklist of things to do before you seek medical help or a prescription. And it's like, have you been in the sunlight? Have you gone for a walk? Have you had water to drink? Have you had adequate sleep? Are
Yeah.
you interacting with people? And I don't know why we can't just add one more thing here and just add,
Meditation.
have you just sat with yourself and relaxed and just taken a moment to breathe and focus on your breath, even for 5 minutes. That just feels like an easy thing to add to that list. That if you can go through all those items and things are still, you're still upset or you're still struggling, then obviously the next step would be to seek some medical help. But I don't know. I think people might get to that step too early.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to downplay the significance of therapy. I think therapy is awesome. I think everyone should see a therapist.
Right.
But it's definitely far easier to see if you've taken care of all the lowest hanging fruit first, with water and exercise and sleep and all that stuff. And that's going to fix so many problems.
Yeah. I don't know if you feel like talking about Postlegate.
Sure. It's your show. I'm just
I mean,
along for the ride.
I enjoy talking with you about everything else, and I'm you know uh
People love
yeah,
it. I mean, it's very interesting to many people.
I go up and down with it because I'm so heavily involved in I'm not the center of it, but sometimes it feels like I am. And um, it surprises me that there's a small group of people who don't believe the data, who,
Again,
if,
I would challenge that assertion. It's not that they don't believe the data, it's that the data are inconvenient to their beliefs.
right. And I just like, I guess it's hard for me to stay in this place, like an emotionally stable place, and to be able to hold back on what I'm saying because I know so much more than the public knows. And I have like a massive amount of frustration surrounding the whole thing, especially like recently. But I don't know if you want to talk about your conversation with Justin the night I posted.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about anything. But basically, uh, I guess the gist of my involvement in this whole ordeal is that I used to live in Sacramento. I played with Mike um, for a couple of years. Mike was never considered to be like a stellar poker player. I'm not even sure if he was a winning poker player. I would assume that he was probably beating the game at that time. The game happened to be like a decent game that we played in, but he was certainly like not the best. Like I have a pretty good conception of who were the best players in Sacramento, and he was never in part of that conversation. Um, and I always liked Mike. Mike was a great guy, and this was all a real surprise to me. Funny story about Mike is that Mike and I got LASIK on the same day at the same facility at adjacent time slots. So we were sitting in the lounge together waiting, and I was like freaking out. They were trying to like give me some Ativan, and they couldn't give me enough Ativan to calm me down. And then they gave me a teddy bear to hold while I was getting my eye sliced open. But yeah, Mike went in right after I did. So anyway, so maybe like a few months before everything came to light, you and others in the community kind of had suspicions. And the thing that people need to recognize is that all of the good players in Sacramento, or I should maybe phrase it differently, there were no good players in Sacramento that were watching the streams, which is unfortunate. I mean, one of the things that I figured out from this is that Stones Live was a frequent broadcast to very few people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the wisest investment on their part, given how few people were tuning in. So the issue with this was that no one had seen enough hands required to come to the conclusions that we eventually came to. And that was really the difficulty, is that, you know, when it's all rumors and speculation and like one hand here or there, you'd hear about this one hand that a person played. You know, people, you know, every individual that was involved had only played a couple hands with him that were of some significance, that were unusual. And so like that wasn't enough. And so, but the thing that's really interesting about this is how the confidence level quickly ratchets up as soon as you stack a few hands up together. So
Right.
if you watch like just one hand, like let's say there's like the 10 worst hands, the 10 most obvious hands. If you watch one of those, then maybe the chance that he's cheating is like 5%. You watch two of them, it like jumps to 50%. You watch 5 of them and it's 99.99.
Right.
And so that's I mean, that's kind of like the Bayesian approach. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about this scandal, is how you can arrive at a reasonable conclusion using statistics in a very, very small sample size, because this is the behavior that you would only see if someone were cheating. So like if that's the way that you frame it, then you get to this level of certainty very, very quickly. So anyway, the rumors were swirling, and Justin, the Stones tournament director, had talked to me a couple of times. One time, maybe like a month before your tweet, in which he was saying that he had done this like internal audit. I mean, I'm worried that I'm just not going to say anything that's new, but he had done an internal audit, and you know, he asked me like what my confidence was that cheating had occurred. I think I might have said like 70%.
But why was he reaching out to you in the first place?
Because Justin and I have always been friends. I mean, we worked together at you know, a casino that's since closed in Sacramento. I was a prop player when I first was living in Sacramento, and he was a dealer.
No,
So
but
we
I'm
became.
saying, was it? Did he tell you that there were complaints, or did he just reach out to you and say, "Hey, do you think there's cheating?" You know what I mean?
No,
Why would he reach out?
I reached out to him, and I thought that this is something that he should get ahead of. So I mean, Justin and I would text occasionally, maybe like once a week or something like that. And I told him that I was concerned. And usually when I expressed that I was concerned about something, like he would call me right away. So he called me and, he said that he'd done this internal audit, and he said something that I actually appreciated. And I don't know how this like changes, the likelihood of his involvement or anything, but he actually said that based on what I was saying and my level of confidence, that he said, well, we should probably assume that cheating is occurring. It's just a matter of figuring out who's doing it. So I think he was very much open to cheating occurring. And, in thinking about this sense, it's hard for me to imagine someone who's not pathological, which I don't think that he is. It's hard to imagine someone who's not pathological just saying, I think cheating is occurring if you're involved in the cheating. I think you deny. I think you do what Mike has done. That's what I think a cheater does. I think you deny it, until you're blue in the face.
So 2 things with that real quick. In one sense, there's no difference at this point between him knowing or being involved and him being just incompetent, in unable to do anything about it, and it happening under his nose.
I actually don't see those as being the same, but I think I know what you're getting at.
Well, so in the civil suit, from what I understand, whether or not he knew, there were complaints and it continued to happen, and he didn't do enough about it if he didn't know. And he's incompetent because of that.
Right. He's incompetent or negligent or involved. I agree that it's one of those 3.
Right. So go on. So after that conversation, or is there anything else you want to tell us about that conversation?
No, that was really the extent of it. Basically the thing that's come up with everyone I've talked to about this is that because cheating is so rare, almost unheard of in the poker community, it's very difficult to make that accusation. And I think that every time I was making an estimate of the probability of cheating, I always had to temper it. And this is like, I think this is it's generally a good strategy to like temper your confidence, because people tend to be overconfident about things. And, we saw that like a lot of our mutual friends were like, oh, I don't want to rush to judgment, or what if he's innocent? And I get that. I think maybe they took it a little bit too far. But yes, it's really difficult to make that accusation. And then I think Justin and I spoke one more time. I think it was the night you tweeted, and he was livid. And then he also, the other thing I remember him saying was that that because you had invoked my name in as one of the people who had supported the claim of cheating, that like somehow my name was tarnished or something like that. Anyway, he was crazy. I think either he felt like he was losing Stones Live, or he felt like the jig was up and he was caught. Again, I'm not really sure, which of those it is. I know that like you're pretty confident in his guilt. I don't know if I'm all that interested in trying to figure out which it is. All I know is that anyone who is rational should come to the conclusion that Mike cheated, and that I don't know. This was like I think it's a great opportunity to think about how we come to conclusions, and how we update based on new information. When it came to light, there were like 2 camps, and now it's kind of pretty much like everyone on one side and then like 2 or 3 people on the other.
Right.
But it was like somewhat more split at the time, and there were common characteristics that were exhibited by the camp that was slow to come to the same conclusion that we came to. And that was troubling to me. I mean, I immediately jumped to the parallel of politics, that I saw elements of politics and political belief systems that they were taking it on faith. Like, I know this guy, I trust this guy. Therefore, there's no amount of information that will dissuade me from believing him. And that's just impossible to defend. No pun intended. Impossible.
I didn't go there. Typically, it's me that's doing the "that's what she said" kind of stuff that you get mad about. So
there's nothing original that can be said about this. I mean, I know it's been talked to death, and I was always worried that it was going to become, for a short period of time or maybe a longer period of time, like become your identity. And I just thought that you were so much bigger than this story, that I was worried about that.
But then I kind of got upset with you for saying that to me, because you kept saying it to me. And I think that this has nothing to do with it becoming my identity, that there was a huge injustice that happened. And I feel as though if we all forget, it'll all blow away. It'll all get swept under the rug, and nothing will happen and no justice will be served. So I feel like not enough people give a shit, and they may get away with it.
Well, let me ask you this. If you were to take a vow of silence, or like there was a gag order where you couldn't talk about it anymore, do you think that the outcome would be any different than if that weren't the case? I mean, don't you think like the lawyer is going to take this and run?
So I think that's hard to measure, because I think even small bits of information may help in the long run, and we may not understand now how important a small piece of information will be then. I think also it's important to keep people curious about this, and to keep putting pressure on the DOJ, keep putting pressure on Stones to make sure that they, if they do run the live stream again, that they will keep the integrity of the game as their number one priority. And so I just feel like when they say the squeaky wheel gets, the oil or the intention, what's the frickin' phrase? The grease. I'm such a Polak. It's one of those things. Like, I think if we all just stop talking about it and forget about it, no justice will be served. And I think there was a great injustice. And I think, I'll tell you things like after we stop recording, I'll tell you a few more things.
Sure. Yeah, I wonder if all possible lessons like have been learned, or like any of the legal proceedings are kind of like are set and are going to be determined by each party's respective counsel.
I also think that not everyone has. So I'm kind of a weirdo. I have these things where some people are motivated. Some people are motivated by money or status or something, and I'm just like, I really get fed up when an injustice is occurring, and I really want a good outcome for things like this. And because I'm so involved, it just would drive me crazy to think that Mike Postle's out somewhere again, cheating potentially, or doing something scummy again. I'd hate to see any more people fleeced. So I don't know. And my points might be so micro that maybe they wouldn't make a difference.
I think you have the unfortunate position of being like too close to it. And like you're so involved in it on a deep, visceral, emotional level. And I think that like clouds your judgment. I think you just want to see this through. Like, I think you're so invested in it that you want to see it to its conclusion, which is that hopefully, like, you know, Stones has to pay out money, or like charges are filed and, you know, he's prosecuted or something like that, or he never plays poker in California ever again. Whatever it ends up looking like. But I know I support you in, like, you know, wanting to fight injustice. I just wonder, you know, the opportunity cost of us talking about Mike Postle are like other bigger injustices, or like things that we care about.
Yeah. That's what I love about you. You kind of like, not only the honest feedback, but, you know, kind of giving me a new focus or something to think about. Yeah, there are definitely better things I can waste my time on. Okay, it's been a couple hours. I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I will pump up your book, or I will let the people know about your book as soon as you come out with it. And
I'll tell you what, I would much rather pump up the Wait But Why. I think
okay.
that's far more important than anything I could read. And I'll tell you what, I like to offer in my article on betting, I talk about the value in offering monetary guarantees for things that you recommend. So I would like to tell anyone who is listening to this, if you read the Wait But Why story of us and you feel it wasn't worth your time, contact me on Twitter and I will pay you whatever you think your time was worth that you lost.
You heard it there, folks. You can make a lot of money if you're bored to shit from Wait But Why. But it's so clever and so entertaining. I really enjoy it. You got me addicted to it, Andrew.
I'm so glad.
Yes. All right. Well, you have a wonderful night. I will see you, I'm sure, one of these weekends for
You as
dinner
well.
and some wine. And
Sounds good.
good night, everyone.